Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And probably the most important updates and statements are coming from the territory of Russian Federation. This night, the previous 12 hours, the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, was interviewed and he gave us lots of very interesting information. This what exactly was Putin talking about. The West persuaded Kiev to continue the war in 2025. Signals were received from Kiev that they will fight to the last Ukrainian. Negotiations with Ukraine began with the beginning of the special military operation. Moscow offered Kiev to leave the Lugansk People Republic and the Donetsk People Republic, and then there would be no military actions. Putin, speaking about the Ukraine issue, said that everything will end in 1.5 or 2 months if Ukraine runs out of sponsorship, money and ammunition. Ukraine's sovereignty is almost zero. Zelensky is now an illegitimate leader and cannot lift his own ban on negotiations with Russian Federation. But if he wants to, there are ways to do this. So the Russians are saying that, if you remember, in 2022, Zelensky adopted a decree that doesn't allow anybody to have negotiations with Russia. And now the Russians are saying that Zelensky currently cannot leave this decree because now he's illegitimate president. He needs to make his own order or his own decree, but he can't do this. So this is the main thing. Furthermore, you can negotiate with anyone, but Zelensky, due to his illegitimacy, cannot sign anything. This is another important thing, because if there are going to be any peace agreement, somebody should sign him, and obviously the Russians will demand that the president of Ukraine sign it. Negotiations between Moscow and Kiev will be illegitimate if they are conducted now. We need to find a way to cancel the previously signed decree. This can be done by the chairman of the Rada, Ukraine parliament. Anyway, if anybody will cancel the previously signed decree that doesn't allow anybody to have negotiations with Russia, anyway, this means that Zelensky will not be able to carry out any negotiations with Russia, because according to Russia, he is illegitimate president. So only one person in Ukraine has the right to have negotiations with Russia and to sign anything with him, and this is, as it written in this article, the chairman of the Rada, the Ukraine parliament. But according to information we have, he is under complete control of Zelensky, and as we understand, Zelensky will never accept and will never agree anybody to cancel anything that was signed by him since the beginning of his president term. And furthermore, today Zelensky was trying to find a solution. He was trying to blame Putin that it is his responsibilities and his thing that he doesn't want to have any negotiations. He stated that today Putin has once again confirmed that he is afraid of negotiations. Every step he takes is aimed at making the war endless. So this is the reaction of Zelensky when Putin called him illegitimate. As you can see from these statements, Putin tries to find a solution how to begin the negotiation process, but for this purposes Zelensky should make his first compromise. But this compromise means that Zelensky will confirm and will sign the papers that he is no longer legitimate president, and he can't do this because he understands if he loses power for at least one day, he will lose the power forever. And we understand that Zelensky wants to become the president for the next term and maybe for many more terms in the future. But if he loses power for a day, he will lose it forever. Everybody understand this. Furthermore, we continue receiving different updates from Ukraine. Today, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine has confirmed a criminal case against the current Minister of Defense of the country, Rustam Umerov. This is very interesting because after the Biden's administration left the President Office of the United States of America, we start receiving lots of interesting reports from Ukraine, especially from the Minister of Defense. So the people and experts are saying that the Biden's administration were having a lot of different schemes and deals through the Ministry of Defense, and now because of that fact that Biden left office, now the people who were involved in this situation try to remove the current head of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and everybody who was connected to the situation. The Russian experts are saying that we should expect fact, a lot of suicide, a lot of plane crashes, and many other things with people who were involved in all those schemes between Biden's office and the office of the president of Ukraine. So let's wait and see. Furthermore, several deputies of Верховная Rada of Ukraine stated that the war will definitely not end in the coming months. I say this as a person who has more information from close sources, a member of Верховная Rada Committee on National Security. So as you can see, people from Ukraine expect that the war will continue. But of course we have a question. So if everybody expects war, if Russia will not start negotiations with Ukraine, if Ukraine blames Russia for not starting the negotiation process, then the question, why we don't see so many changes on the ground as we used to see at least a month ago? And to answer this question, it's very good to open this video. And in this video, for example, we can see one of the episodes that took place somewhere in the vicinity of the Pokrovsk direction. And you see the quality of the surface. You see that it's currently very difficult to use roads. We're not talking about fields. We're not talking about the trillions. We're just talking about roads that the Russians were used to support their forces. As you can see, there are no more safe roads. There are no more good quality of the surface. Basically, now in January, it's impossible to carry out any offensive operation because if you start, your vehicles will stuck there forever and obviously destroyed by the Ukraine FPV drones. So currently, both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are waiting for better weather, and when better weather comes, obviously we're going to see significant number of offensive operations carried out by both sides. And today the Ukrainian sources published a very interesting article that they're waiting and expecting minus 16 Celsius by Celsius in the next days, which will mean that most likely as soon as we see minus 16, the surface will be freezed, and then we're going to see a significant number of offensive operations from both sides. The Russians will attack and the Ukrainians will either attack somewhere in the northern regions of Ukraine or counterattack somewhere along the current line of combat contact. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. Despite very bad weather, but very bad quality of the surface of the ground, the Russians continued their offensive operation, and today several sources reported, very reliable sources from the Russian side, that the Russian armed forces managed to enter the settlement of Dachne from the east. So according to them, currently by the beginning of the 29th of January, everything that is located to the east of this red line is already under complete Russian control. As for now, we don't have any proofs, but let's wait and see. Now let's discuss the situation to the north of the Andreevka fortified area. According to different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to take under control or physically cut the road TO 515 between the settlement of Yasenevo and the settlement of Andreevka. This is the second point where the Russians managed to cut this road physically. The first point takes place in the northeastern part of Andreevka, and the second place where the Russians cut the road is somewhere in between Yasenevo and Andreevka itself. The Ukrainians are retreating, and we see that Ukrainians can't do anything with the Russian offensives in this area. Now let's discuss the situation in the Dnipro direction. According to the same pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their positions to the south of Nadezhdinka by taking under control additional 3 lines. This information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources. As for the Pokrovsk direction, from this area we haven't received anything. We got a lot of videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian positions, and this is the only thing that the Russians can do right now. Just to attack equipment, just to attack abandoned vehicles, discover Ukrainian positions with drones, with artillery, and that's it. It's very difficult to carry out any offensive operation right now. The Ukrainian sources published today a lot of very interesting footages from the territory of the city of Pokrovsk. This is some government office, some cultural building, and as you can see, we can see the consequences of Russian attack with the use of probably Iskander. As a result of attack, as you can see, a huge part of the building was reduced to ruins. Another video from the city of Pokrovsk, we can see the funnel of a missile strike or artillery strikes. We see several buildings damaged, but anyway, of course, despite the damages, despite the situation around the city of Pokrovsk, we see completely different picture in comparison with the city of Toretsk or with the city of Volchansk. We see and that the Russians are trying to save the city of Pokrovsk as long as possible and to deal the minimum minimal damage, because they understand that, as I understand, the Russians have some plans regarding the settlement in the future. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of the settlement of Baranovka. The Russians managed to take under control several strongholds and to basically to semi-encircle the settlement of Vadiane Druge from the southeast. So we see that the Russians are trying to encircle these territories and to capture them. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Toretsk. From one side, the Russians improved their positions in the western direction from the settlement of Nilipovka. Basically, we colored the contested area in Russian favor. And another important update is coming from the city of Toretsk. The fourth day in a row, the Ukrainians carry out counter-offensive operation, and as a result of the latest counter-offensive operation, the armored forces of Ukraine managed to restore complete control over the mine of Toretskaya. So this is the, let's say, the last bastion of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area, and based on this video we can see that Ukrainians managed to restore control over this territory and to secure their positions. I'll remind you that Ukraine counter-offensive operation in the area of Toretsk started probably on the 25th of January. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 26th of January. The Russians just managed to take under control some part of the mine, but then the Ukrainians began counter-offensive operation, and starting from the 27th of January they were restoring control over small pieces of the city of Toretsk in the northern part. The first territory that was recaptured by the Ukrainians is the Terikon of mine number 12. We have video, we discussed this video several times. Several vehicles entered this part and restore control over the territories and capture Russian soldiers. On the 29th of January, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions around the Terikon and the mine of Toretsk by taking under control the residential area. And today, by the beginning of the 29th of January, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the mine itself. So it's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening here. Maybe the Russians don't feel themselves, let's say, comfortable in this area. So of course, it's a very big question why the Russians are retreating, why the Russians can stabilize the situation after they managed to take almost the entire city of Toretsk under complete control. So we have lots of questions, and it's very interesting how the situation is going to develop in the future. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Chasiv, and today the Russian sources published very important video. In this video we can see how the armored forces of Russian Federation were trying to take under control this stronghold, and as a result of clashes in this area the Russians managed to take this stronghold under complete control. Based on this video we have adjusted the map, and we see that this is something like a very powerful breakthrough of the armored forces of Russian Federation, and this allowed the Russians to begin offensive operation in the direction of Zemlyanki, the most southern micro district of the city of Chasiv. If the Russians take under control this territory, then the Russians will be very close, or will get a bit closer to the creation of the Chasiv cauldron. Very important changes on the ground. Now let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. As for the northern area, as we discussed in the previous video, during the previous 24 hours the Russians mainly were involved into maintaining the line of combat contact. At least this information was provided us by different pro-Russian sources. The Russians managed to take under complete control the road R79 that connects the settlement of Zapadne settlement of Dvorichne. The Russians took under control the forest belts around the settlements, so they're improving their positions because the weather currently doesn't allow the Russians to advance deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. So that's why they decided to focus their attention on maintaining positions and the lines. And now let's discuss the situation in the Sudzha direction. Most likely the Russians understand that in the very near future the weather will be stabilized, the temperature will go deep below zero, and this will allow the Russians to restore to start from the beginning the broad front line attacks. So that's why the Russians during the previous 24 hours were pretty concentrated on Ukraine vehicles and equipment with FPV drones. And by the way, this is the second day in a row we received significant number of FPV drone strikes in this area, which means that the Russians are trying to destroy as many as possible equipment of the armored forces of Ukraine before another wave of attack. Several vehicles were destroyed in the territory of the Sumu region. Another day, by the way, I pointed your attention to yesterday. Several equipments and V positions were destroyed in the vicinity of Sverdlikova. Lots of explosions and lots of artillery strikes took place in the area of Martinovka and Suja itself, and lots of explosions and lots of activities we can see in the area of Martinovka. So we expect the weather, and then everything will begin. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.